Shalom, Assalamu alaikum, peace and blessings, everyone. Thank you for watching. I'm Lale Tunsa. This is Rabbi Wiseman and Dr. Zahir, and we're here from Universal God Message of Peace. Today we're going to be discussing the topic of prayer. How can we make our prayers more meaningful? So this week, Rabbi Wiseman is going to give us a Jewish perspective. So over to you, Rabbi Wiseman.
Thank you so much. I'm going to do my best with this because it's a big topic. It's a big topic and a difficult topic and also a very individual topic, right? Like anything else. If you ask somebody, you said, well, what's the best way to eat, right? What's the best way to eat? What can I do? How can I eat better? Well, that's going to depend on your nature, right? It's going to depend on who you are. It's going to depend on the temperament of your body, on your physical, on your physical stature and all of those things. And the same thing is true in spirituality, that it's very hard to give something one size fits all, because feeding the spirit is just as individual as feeding the body. But let me offer a couple of thoughts and kick it off that way. So first, I think, is to remember what prayer is for and what it is not for, and what is prayer and what is not prayer. So prayer, as I understand it, is an opportunity for us to connect with our Creator. Prayer is not for God. It is a service of God, but it is not for God, right? We're not doing it. God doesn't need our prayers. God doesn't require our prayers. We require our prayers. The purpose of the prayer is for us to establish our connection with the Creator, and for us to show our love and to show our love and our submission to the Creator. But there's no benefit. There's no benefit to the Creator, so to speak. So it's important to understand this is something that is something for our benefit. And second, also very important to understand that prayer is not transactional. Very often, people think of prayer as kind of as putting coins into a slot machine and expecting to get the jackpot back, right? They're just kind of sticking the coins in, and they think, okay, I'm going to give a couple of prayers and then I'm going to get all this stuff back. And very often, a lot of people treat their prayers, right, as being kind of a transaction. I'm going to give this to God, and then God is going to give back to me. And that's not what prayer is about. So as far as tips for prayer, the best way to learn about prayer is through dating. Now, I understand that dating is a problem. I understand, so I don't want to get into any arguments about about these things. But we can learn a lot about prayer from dating, okay? So the first thing about dating, okay, there's one sure way to mess up a date beyond everything else. What is it? Don't show up. Okay, so the first most important thing for any date is that the person has to show up. If the person doesn't show up, okay, that's it. There's no relationship, right? So the first thing that's required of any relationship, of creating a relationship, is for the person to actually show up. So the first step in praying is actually praying, right? Is actually showing up. Is actually showing up to pray. Setting time, setting a place in order to pray. And in fact, the prayers that we have that are the set prayers. In Judaism, there are 3 set prayers a day. In Islam, there are 5 set prayers a day. Those set prayers are not exactly praying. They're kind of reminders to pray. right? We set a time, we make the opportunity to pray, right? We create the space within which a person can have a connection with the Creator, but the connection with the Creator is going to have to come from the inside, not just from the things that you do on the outside. Setting that time, right? Setting that time, going through the motions, going through the actions, saying the words, all of those things are meant to are meant to create, just in the same way as, go back to the dating analogy, just the same way you show up with your flowers and you show up with your candy, right? None of those things actually creates the relationship, right? None of those things are the relationship. They're things which contribute to the relationship. They contribute to the connection between you and the other person. Because in giving them, right, by giving them, you create the connection with the other person, right? By giving the flowers, by giving the chocolate, right? I create a connection with that other person by sharing words, right? And it's interesting, when we pray, right? When we pray, we mostly whisper, right? So imagine you're sitting at a table, right? So you've been fixed up on a date for marriage, date only for marriage, and you're sitting on a date, and the person sits like this, back like this, and yells at you, hey, over across the other side of the table, how's the dinner? Is it good? Right? Now compare that to they lean in, and they quietly say, how's the dinner? Is it good? Right? So there's a quiet, right? There's a power to the quietness. There's a power to the whispering. There's a power to attention. We can tell the difference when we talk with one another. We can tell the difference when somebody is casual with us, and they're talking to us far away, and when we're leaning in, and when we're focused and we're attentive, right? And we're still and we're quiet, right? It creates a different kind of attention, and therefore a different kind of connection with the person. And so prayer requires a kind of serenity and quiet, a whispering, right? We have to sort of create that personal space in ourselves, of serenity and quiet, to be able to focus, and sincerity. I think that for me, just speaking for me, the biggest challenge, and I think the beauty of prayer, is learning to be honest with God. Is learning to be honest. Very often, I remember years ago, I was doing my PhD, and I was in a Hindu temple. I was in a Hindu temple, and I heard a Hindu guy. He stood in front of his God, and he said, "Oh God," says, "I have not done anything wrong. I have never done anything wrong." And I thought to myself, "Are you serious? Are you serious?" I wanted to slap the guy on the head. I said, "Are you serious?" He says, "You're standing in front of what you think is God, and you're telling him that you have never done anything wrong." Well, I'm going to tell you, okay, I'm a human being and you're a human being. And there is no way that you can say, I have never done anything wrong. Okay? You can't fool God, right? You can't fool God. So learning how to be honest with God, and how to be honest, which means being honest with yourself, and to be able to say, God, you know what, God, I want to serve you. I want to serve you, but it's really hard. And this is where I find it hard. This is so difficult for me. Please help me to be able to do it. I'm unable to do it. My heart breaks that I'm unable to do it. To be able to speak honestly and say, I don't know whether I'm doing the right thing. I don't know. Please give me guidance. But to be able to speak your heart, to really be able to be honest, to talk to God as you would talk to a person who really, 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 really cares about you, who really loves you. And not to be afraid, and not to try to rationalize. So to keep it simple, and honest, and make that time, right? To make that time to just talk to the Creator. So while you're doing your prayers, okay, make sure that you do your prayers at the set times. You remind yourself to make the space, right? But also make sure to actually talk to the Creator in the most honest and simple and most simple words that you can find. And the prayers that you do say, right, your set prayers, understand what you say, right? Make the effort to understand what it is you're saying and what it is you're doing, right? If you're doing bodily, right? If you're doing the bodily postures, understand the meaning of those postures. Understand what's going on inside the prayer. Understand what the words are, right? When a person says Allahu Akbar, okay, understand what that means, what the implications of that are. It's a huge topic, but so that it's not just words coming out of your mouth, but it's something which it's emanating from your being, right? And the same, especially in Jewish prayer, there are so many words, right? There's a lot of words, lots and lots of words, right? So sometimes, okay, in Jewish prayer, less is more. Sometimes less is more. Sometimes people think that spirituality, if you want to be more spiritual, you want to be more religious, you got to do more. So I would say when it comes to prayer, better is much more important than more, right? Somebody, right, to do more, it's not like, when it comes to earning money, okay, earn as much money as you can. Okay, fine, no problem. Earn as much money as you can. When it comes to material things, more is usually better. Not always, okay? When it comes to eating pizza, more is not better. When it comes to most everything else, more can be better. But when it comes to prayer, more is not necessarily better. Better is better, right? To actually have focus, and even to do much less. This is on page 2 of the Code of Jewish Law, right? Better to do a little bit of prayer with concentration than to do a lot without. And says that the prayer without concentration, prayer without intention, is like a body without a soul, right? It's like a body without a soul. It's like a dead thing, right? And we don't want our prayer, God forbid, to be a dead thing. We want it to be something which is living and breathing and alive. And so sometimes it's better to do less. So understand, right? Do less, but understand what it is that you're saying. Understand what it is that you're doing, and do it with sincerity, and do it with simplicity, and your prayer will become better. So I'll leave it with that so far.
Oh, wow. That was so lovely, Rabbi Wiseman. Thank you so much for sharing your amazing words of wisdom about prayer. Dr. Zahir, do you have any questions for Rabbi Wiseman?
Well, he has raised many important points. If I were to mention them in my own words, he mentioned humbleness. He mentioned the need for not making it transactional in its intent. He mentioned the significance of knowing what you're saying. And I honestly couldn't have agreed more on the fact that it's not how much you pray as it is how well you pray. That's true. I just want to say, all these points are very important. In my own tradition, I find, obviously, it's very easy to criticize, and sometimes you feel a little hesitant to criticize because one gets an impression, well, in one's own heart, as if what you're doing is better. That's not the case, but we just criticize to understand and to improve. Honestly, in my tradition, I've found that people have made it mostly transactional. Um, Sometimes, in some cases, it is a worldly transaction, but in most cases, it's a transaction of uh, we doing well here and getting something in return many more times than the value, real value in the next life. I've got nothing against it, but honestly, I would like to have a feedback from Rabbi Wiseman in that my understanding is that, whatever you are promised in the next life depends on the quality that you offer. And the quality has got nothing to do with this understanding that you're going to get much more there. The quality has got to do with, as he has rightly pointed out, your love for your creator and, your inclination to submit to him. So I think that is what really we should go for uh, instead of looking for a transaction that you're making. I'll do this and he'll do that for me. I really agree with it.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my dating for a second, right? So imagine, I always get in trouble with this analogy, but okay. So imagine that there's your potential spouse, right? Sitting across from the table, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, this person's going to give me such a great life, right? They're going to give me I'm going to have a palace, right? I'm going to have a palace, and I'm going to have a swimming pool, an infinity pool. I'm going to have a home in Cancun, Mexico. I'm going to have, right? It says, but that person who's looking, what are they thinking you're thinking? What do they want you to be thinking? They want you to be thinking, wow, I love this person. Wow, I really love them, right? And you're thinking, what am I going to get out of this? Right? What am I going to get out of this? God doesn't want us to be thinking about what are we going to get out of him, right? Even if it's in the afterlife, right? Even in the afterlife, but to think because that we love him, we want to serve him, we want to, right? And out of gratitude, right? And out of gratitude for all of the amazing gifts that he's given us with this amazing world and with this amazing being that we are, right? And not, because of what we're going to get out of him. Because we don't want that thing about, we don't even want that with each other, right? Do I want to have a relationship with somebody who wants to get something out of me, even if it's in the future? No, right? I want to have a relationship with somebody because they want to have a relationship with me, right? Because I'm important to them, and because pleasing me is important to them, not because their pleasure in the afterlife is important to them. Which doesn't mean they don't get the reward. Les, yeah, they get the reward. They get the reward. I have no problem with that. They get the reward, but that should not be what we're looking for. We should be serving in spite of the reward,
True.
right? We should be able to say, you know what, I don't even want it. I get it, I don't get it. It's not, you give me the house in Cancun, okay, maybe, yes, well, okay, fine. Maybe I'll take it, maybe I won't, but I don't care.
That's right. Rabbi, I don't know, how would you deal with this understanding of mine? I've always felt that quite apart from many other important um, offerings that the prayer has for an individual, um, I find it an occasion almost always to say sorry to him. And honestly, if I've ever had good prayers, those were the ones when I was actually ashamed, facing him and
Yeah.
telling him, I'm really embarrassed. I shouldn't have done these things, but and it gives you a feeling you cannot get from anywhere else. It's so profound, deep, and soothing, comforting. that you would want to do it over and over again. And I agree with you. It doesn't take you to do it for a very long time. It just comes if you get this feeling that you know you are in front of him, and somehow it so happens that when you are when you get a feeling that you are kind of facing him spiritually, you're reminded of the wrong things that you've done, and it just comes out of you. So that to me, that's the loveliest part.
Somebody once asked, there was a rabbi, and they asked him, they said, what was your most beautiful prayer experience? And they expected him to say, oh, when I went up into the mountains and I went into a cave and I meditated, or when I went to, went here, I went there, and he said, I came home and it was on Friday afternoon. My house was crazy. My kids were running around. My kids were running around. My wife was screaming. Everything was, I opened the door and it was absolute chaos. It was chaos. And he says, I stood in the doorway and I put my hand on the doorway and I talked to God for 1 minute.
Wow.
And I said, please, God. So when I walk in that door, okay, let me greet everybody with a smile. Let me just be calm. Okay, let me just be calm because I can feel it inside me right now. I don't want to be like that. He says, just, and he said, that was the best prayer I ever had. That was the best prayer I ever had. And I think sometimes it's those it's that little moment when and you just, even sometimes I think that the best prayer sometimes is just a sigh. When you've done something you shouldn't do, you just uh that itself, that can be more powerful than 100 words sometimes.
That's
And to know that to know that that's also communicating with the creator. That's also, those moments of honesty. I think that part of what, when you've done something and you have to face up to it, we're vulnerable, and you're honest, and it's, we're like that with each other too. I mean, the people who are your good friends are the people you've gotten real with, right? Are the people who have been with you when you were down, when the people have been with you through the things that you've had to struggle through, and who stick with you through those things, right? And so the creator is like that too, right? I mean, not just there for you when you're great and wonderful and everything is perfect and you're perfect, but is with you when you're not so perfect and when things are not so perfect. So
true. True. I just wanted to know if, I mean, I'm sure you must have had this challenge several times. You must have faced it. There are people who are very regular in their prayers, um, but I mean, you can't peep into the hearts of others, but you can see that it's just a mechanical exercise. It's a
yeah.
routine that they have become a part of. Obviously, you tell them to make it a real, genuinely special and profound occasion. But how would one motivate them?
It's a struggle. It's a struggle.
Yeah.
It's a struggle for me. I think it's a struggle for everybody. I mean, whenever you do anything regularly, whenever you do anything repeatedly, right? It's so easy for it to become muscle memory, right? Where we just all of a sudden just, you're just going through the motions, and
Yeah.
I've had times when I have finished the prayer and I couldn't remember whether I'd even started it. Like I remembered literally nothing. Like it was like,
Uh,
how did I get here? And I think that, and you see this all the time, and it happens to a lot of people. And the only thing you can do, I think, is the simplest thing is to make a habit of preparing yourself, and when you go to the gym, you warm up,
yeah.
you warm up. I think there's a warm up for prayer too. I mean, and to spend a couple of seconds beforehand or a couple of minutes beforehand, kind of collecting yourself, setting an intention, saying, this is what I'm going to do now. And I walk to synagogue, and I only have one prayer on my way to synagogue. I say it all the time. I just repeat it over and over again. It says, please let me actually pray today. Please just let me pray today, right? Actually pray today. And really, because I live about 3 minutes from the synagogue, I have 3 minutes. So in those 3 minutes, that's all I do. I just say, please, I'm going to synagogue. Please let me actually pray. Okay? Not just go there and do my thing and I'm putting, and go through the motions, but please today, let me actually pray. And mostly it works. Mostly it works. And sometimes it doesn't work.
Excellent. Before I give the mic to Dr. Lale, I just want to ask you something somewhat different, probably related, but probably different. It seems from your mention, and you mentioned it before as well, that you spent some time in India,
Mm-hmm.
and you've been associated with both Muslims, Hindus, and probably Christians as well. Others maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's a struggle within me. Have you ever thought of talking to a Hindu, asking him what exactly is he going through, or you think it's just a very personal matter and I would rather stay away from it? Have you ever ventured into it?
Yeah. I mean, but my whole PhD was about that. I mean,
Wow. Okay.
yeah. So I spent, so my PhD stuff was all interviewing people at a particular temple about like why they were there and what they were trying to achieve and what they were,
Yeah.
And it was interesting, but also extremely transactional. I mean, Hinduism is, I mean, it's a pretty straightforward transaction in some respects, because the god is sort of conceived of as like a king, right? I mean, and just like a human king, you do the same things. You offer them nice things that they like, foods and other kinds of things. In exchange, they give you gifts, right? That's how kings work, right? You go to the king, you give him your presents, your gifts, and then you ask him to give back to you, and he gives back to you. And so largely, those relationships with those gods are transactional, and but yeah, I spend a lot of time with that. It's interesting. It makes prayer generally into something which is transactional. Not always. I mean, obviously there's the tradition of bhakti, of devotion.
Sorry, I promised to give you, but just I have one more question now.
Oh, no, please keep asking the questions. It's fine. You're doing fine for time as well.
Rabbi Wiseman, I, unlike most of my fellow religion people, I have a very clear, strong understanding that God has made this world a level playing field for all humans. He couldn't have done it otherwise. I mean, I can't imagine him doing it any different.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I have this very, satisfying or feeling that no matter what anybody in any background tradition is doing sincerely well, is doing her job. We will talking about sincerity in prayers, and we're talking about feelings, and we talked about the fact that you prayed to the Creator just 1 minute, give me the ability to just smile and face the situation. Do you think, given now, obviously you've done your PhD, it's the same quality of relationship that can get developed if you have an understanding that these are the statues and behind them are some deities who are powerful. I don't know. I'm confused, honestly. I don't know.
So I'll answer you with a story. I'll answer you with a story. So once upon a time, there's a famous rabbi. He was a famous rabbi. He was a speaker. He was a brilliant speaker. And he used to go from town to town, and they would pay him a lot of money. People would collect money, and they would pay him to stay over Shabbat and to speak. And he was like he was a powerful speaker. And he told stories. And he was a very good speaker. So he was named the Magid of Dubno, the storyteller of Dubno. So this storyteller, so there was a guy who pretended to be him, right? Guy who pretended. He showed up in this town and he said, "I am the Magid of Dubno." And they said, "Oh," and they collected all this money and they gave him a beautiful place to stay and they gave him the best food and they gave him everything. And he spoke in the synagogue. He spoke nicely. He spoke well, and they sent him on his way with all their money. The next week, the real Magid of Dubno, the real one, showed up. And he said, "I'm the Magid of Dubno." They said, "No, you're not." They said, "No, really, I am." He says, "Prove it." So he proved it to them. He said, "Oh," and they said, "Oh, no." He said, "There was a guy here last week pretending to be you. We gave him everything. We gave him all of our money. We gave him the best chicken. We gave him the best everything. We gave him everything we had. And now we have nothing left for you. You must be so angry at us." He said, "Angry at you? Why should I be angry at you?" He says, well, we gave him all of our money." He says, "But you didn't give him all of your money. You gave me all of your money." He says, "You didn't think he
Wow.
was him. You thought he was me."
Yeah.
So somebody wanted to ask the Magid of Dubno. They said to him, they said, "Well, what does God think of people who worship idols? Does he hate them?" And he says, "Not necessarily." He said, "Not necessarily." He says,
Wow.
because maybe they think, right? Maybe they think they're worshiping God. Maybe that's what they
Wow.
think is God. And so even though they're making a mistake, right? Even though they're making a mistake and they think that God has a form or there's this symbolic representation or whatever else, right? He says, maybe God also understands. Maybe God also understands that they're making an error, but what they're really trying to do is they're really trying to pray to God, right?
Wow.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
This is
it's
very profound.
it's very deep. Yeah, it's a deep story.
I really am going to think about it. This is
Yeah.
something that is given me a lead now. Okay. Thank you very much for saying that. Thank you
Yeah.
very much. Yes, Dr. Dani.
Yeah, that's an amazing point. And
Yeah.
some amazing questions and amazing answers. So thank you both so much. Especially that last point that you made, Rabbi Wiseman.
Yeah.
I think that is really beautiful. And it just highlights how important our sincerity is and our intention, and how important it is to seek truth and to follow the truth that has been revealed to us. And perhaps the truth might be revealed to someone else on a different level to us, or in a different way, in a different language, through a different book, through a different type of revelation. And but I think what matters, personally, I also agree with that. I think what matters is that our intention is to please our Creator and to try and see our Creator in everything and seek wisdom in everything. I have a question though. So we were talking, you mentioned that obviously to make our prayers more meaningful, we have to concentrate and be mindful, and it's good to prepare. And these are great practical tips. So I have two questions. One of them, how about giving to charity before praying, or giving to charity after praying for something? Does that help to lift up the words? And secondly, should somebody who really struggles to be mindful during their prayers, let's say if they pray 5 times a day or 3 times a day, and they've got this discipline going, but they feel like they really struggle to be mindful during their prayers because there's so much going on in their lives, would you advise them from, you know, Jewish perspective to like carry on with that discipline, carry on praying, even if they are not concentrating, or to not pray and to just wait until they're better, you know, develop your ability to concentrate, and then to develop that discipline of regularly praying. What would you advise?
So two things. So the first question about charity is it's a beautiful question. So we have a custom, and Rabbi Nachman says this. He says that when you give charity, it creates peace in the world, right? Why does it create peace? Because you think about it, the heart of a poor person, right? The heart of a poor person is agitated by giving charity, right? You're eventually going to bring peace to another person, brings peace into the world. And so from that perspective, right, when we give charity, it clears the air, so to speak, right? It kind of clears the air. There's even a custom some people have of having a charity box in the house. We have one over here, and they shake the charity box before they pray, right? The idea is the sound, right? This is the sound clears the air and kind of wakes you up. But also, right, for those people who are transactional, right? We say to God, you say, okay, God, I'm asking you to help me, right? Well, if I'm going to ask you to help me, I have to be prepared to help somebody else first, right? I have to be prepared to help somebody else first. How can I go to the Creator and say, Creator, please give me this, give me that, give me this, when I'm unwilling to give to another person? So we give to the other person first, right? And we say, if we give to the other person, we express generosity, right? We express generosity first, and before we go asking, right? Before we go asking, we express our generosity. That's the first. The second is situations like that, and I get this, of course, comes up all the time. You know, when people get dried out, okay, that's how I would describe it, right? People get dried out, you know, and the prayer just gets dried out, and they, you know, they're maybe able to do it, you know, but it's difficult, and they're pushing themselves through it, and it's, you know, and it. So I would encourage them to continue. I would encourage them to continue at the absolute minimum, right? I would say do less, right? I would say do less, but more, right? Do less, but more. So keep on doing, keep the times, right? Keep the times, right? Keep the times as best as you can, right? But really, right, do, you know, talk to somebody about how to do the prayer in such a way that you're going to be able to do as much as you can, right? But do it better, right? And you know, and eventually your focus, and hopefully your focus will, normally when focus becomes a project, when it becomes something that you're interested in, you can develop it, right? Well, the real problem is when people don't know that they're supposed to develop it at all, right? They just think, okay, I'm supposed to show up, do, you know, go up, go down, you know, do my thing. In our case, say the words, mumble, 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 and then go home, right?
Yeah.
As opposed to say, okay, I'm gonna do less. I'm gonna focus. I pray half of what most people who go to my synagogue pray. I pray half. Because if I were to try to pray all of that, and the amount of time allotted to me, it would be impossible. It's just impossible. So,
and also I think it's good to ask ourselves, what is the purpose of my prayer? Like you said, does, you know, God need our prayers? It's us that need our prayers. You know, what's the purpose of it? If we can clarify in our minds why are we praying? Let's ask ourselves, why are we praying? Why are we making time to do this? Who is going to benefit from this? What is the purpose of it? You know, my understanding from the scripture is that the purpose of making time for regular prayer is to help us remember our Creator and His presence, and to try and bring that into our practical day-to-day life. So actually, you know, the remembrance of our Creator is important, and the remembrance of who we are, you know, what's our purpose here, where are we going, these questions. And so if our prayer isn't achieving that, then what are we doing it for? You know, who is it benefiting? Like, what are we getting out of it? But I do agree that actually that making the time to do it, even if you're not focusing, is, you know, the routine of it is so important. And I can relate to this from personal experience, is that actually, even if it's transactional, even if you're not focusing, it's still better to do it, because there's a blessing, I think, which comes from even making the time to do something that you're not doing properly. If you believe it's good, you know, if your intention is that it's, and if you're going to ask, then why not ask your Creator? You know, if it's going to be transactional, who's better to ask than your Creator? For he's our provider, our, you know, sustainer. And actually, so I think a lot of people stop praying or stop doing things which they think they need to be perfect at what they're doing. So they feel like they're not good enough to pray, or they feel like, because I'm not good enough, I'm not doing it properly, there's no point doing it, it's not going to be accepted. But actually, I would say no, do it anyway. That's my personal opinion as well. I would advise from my personal experience as well to do that, because it's so easy to get lost and distracted in this world, you know, to get lost in your work, to get lost in, you know, chit chat and things that, you know, to forget why you're here and what you're supposed to be doing. But actually, if you've got that routine of praying, it can just, even if it's just for a second, just to help you refocus and to return to.
Yeah. One of my best prayers was on a day that I was unable to pray. You know, we have a rule that if you're really, 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 really upset, you shouldn't pray, right? If you're really, really upset, you shouldn't pray, because your prayer is just not going to, if there's no chance, right? If there's no chance that you're going to be able to, then it's better not to pray. So that's only happened to me once, that I was in such a horrible, horrible, horrible place that I just knew, like, I just can't pray. I just can't. It's just not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. And so I found myself having to say to God, it says, I know it's time, you know, I know it's time, but like, I can't, like, it would be disrespectful for me to like, to try this right now, because there's just no way. I just, and it was a great prayer. It was like, yeah. And I ended up, you know, making it in the last minute, right? Because I was like, oh, I guess I can, because I just did. So I guess, you know,
and you spoke to him directly, and I think
yeah, and said, you know, I'm messed up today. You know, I messed up. My head isn't in the game. You know, that's very often. I mean, honestly, a lot of times that's my first. You know, I admit to God. You know, I'll walk in and I'll say, okay, listen, today my head is not in the game. I know it. I know I'm far away. You know, I'm still back at home having the conversation. You know, I'm still still rehearsing all the things I should have said and could have said and would have said. I'm still doing that. But okay, I'm gonna try. You know, I'm gonna try. So
yeah, I think that's beautiful. Beautiful advice, and wonderful questions, Dr. Zahir.
thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Are there any more questions from your side, Dr. Zahir, for Rabbi Wiseman?
My mind has started thinking about what he's mentioned. Probably when we'll meet next time, I'll have questions.
Okay, very good. And I'll have questions for you too. So next time it's on you. Next time it's on you. I get to sit back.
So thank you both so much. God bless
you very much. Thank you.
Pleasure.
And look forward to seeing you again next week for part 2.
Monday. Yeah.
Next Monday, God willing, and Dr. Zahir is going to talk about how we can make our prayers more meaningful from an Islamic perspective. Okay, blessings. Inshallah. Bye.